The church may have contributed much to science, art, education, and medicine over the centuries, but is the church still needed today? Can't science alone take up the charge and lead the world forward in a new progressive way? What role does the church have, if any, in the modern world? These are important questions, and so we're going to talk about them today on the Science and Faith Podcast. So in order to understand what the role of the church will be in the present and eventually in the future, we have to understand what the role of the church was in the past. So what I want to do is I want to just look very quickly at what are some of the contributions over the last several hundred years that the church has made in society. So first of all, I think one of the biggest contributions that the church has made is in the area of education. So the very establishment of the idea of a university came out of the Middle Ages and the church working to establish a formalized, organized way of imparting knowledge and then measuring whether or not that imparting of knowledge was effective and how much a person learned. And that's eventually how we got what we know today as degrees and diplomas and the whole entire university setting. It was the church that organized education and gave it sort of an institution in which people could learn and grow, and then that knowledge could be measured as compared to what is known and what other people know. So that was a huge contribution made by the church. Secondly, in the area of education as well, whenever the church sent out missionaries to new lands and new places, one of the first things that missionaries would do was they would establish a school. And this school was not just for children, but for anyone who wanted to learn to read and write and be able to educate themselves and learn new things and make greater, bigger, more meaningful contributions to society. And as a result of the missionary efforts of Christians in the church, sending missionaries around the world, building schools, the church has done more than anyone else in the way of contributing to people's education, the general education and betterment of the world society, not just the Western society. So those are very significant contributions that the church has made. In addition to education, there's, of course, healthcare. What we know today as hospitals were started by the church in many parts of the world where there was not access to healthcare or a very primitive healthcare. Missionaries, again, would go in, and one of the first things they would do, in addition to establishing schools, is they would establish a hospital. And they would bring in doctors and medical staff to see to the medical needs of various societies around the world. And much of the advancements that we have in medicine were made by Christians who were also medical professionals, very, very devout men and women of faith worked in the medical community. And so the church has a very long history stemming back to the first centuries of the church of working for the betterment, the physical health betterment and improvement of people all over the world. But what about the field of the natural sciences? Well, even there, when we look, most of the significant contributions that came in the field of the natural sciences were made by devout Christians who were also scientists, or clergymen who were also additionally scientists. For example, Hildegard of Bingen, early 12th century, was a German Benedictine abbess considered the founder of scientific natural history in Germany. William Turner, who was in the 16th century, is known as the father of English botany. Francis Bacon, of course, in the 15th and the 16th and 17th century, helped establish what we now know today as the modern scientific method. The way in which we go about investigating the natural world was founded by noted theist and Christian Francis Bacon. Gregor Mendel, who in the early 19th century, before Darwin, sort of figured out the genetics behind inheritability, and who has kind of established what the field of genetics as we know it today. He's considered the father of genetics, was also a priest and a scientist. William Kirby was a clergyman who saw the scientific study as an extension of his religious work. He was a chemist and a physicist and a meteorologist, and he's known as the founder of British entomology. Lord Kelvin, of which we get, of course, the degree measurements in Kelvin, was a mathematician and a physicist, and had all kinds of contributions. He established the first and second laws of thermodynamics, also very devout Christian. And then, of course, the Belgian Catholic priest Georges Lamatière, who lived in the late 19th, early 20th, and mid-20th century. He was a mathematician, astronomer, and professor of physics, and he was the one who observed the expansion of the universe, and he was the one who formulated what we now call today the Big Bang Theory. He was not only a Christian, but he was a Belgian Catholic priest. So here we have a clergyman and a scientist who has made a significant contribution to the world of science with what we now know today as the Big Bang Theory. So these are significant contributions, and you say, okay, well, that was, middle of the 20th century. What about today? Well, as we look around the world today, we have many scientists who are believers. Probably the most noted, most well-known would be Francis Collins, who is the director of the NIH, National Institutes of Health in the USA. He's an evangelical Christian, has written books about his faith and his conversion from atheism to Christianity. He started an organization called the Biologos Foundation, which is all about demonstrating the harmony between science and the Christian faith. And of course, if you don't know, he's received several presidential awards. He was the head of the Human Genome Project, which successfully mapped the entire human genome. He's helped lead the efforts. His organization has led the effort for the COVID-19 vaccine. So, significant contributions in the scientific world from faithful believers and Christians. Now, you might say, okay, that's great and wonderful, but that's all in the past and somewhat in the present. But what about in the future? What role could the church possibly have? We don't need the church anymore. We're going to look strictly to science. Well, I would say if you say we're going to look strictly to science to kind of lead society forward, I would have to ask the question, is that even science's role? Does science want, in a sense, to be the avenue by which society is led forward? I don't think science inherently is interested in leading society forward in the thought of ethics, in the thought of constructing a just society and the issues of justice and ethics and morality. That's not science's job. It's not science's role. So it's a little foolish to say we're going to look to science to lead society forward when science inherently can't do that. It would be very foolish to take up a tool that can't perform a function and then say this is the tool we're going to use to have this function. So imagine taking a wrecking ball and saying we're going to build a building with a wrecking ball. Well, the wrecking ball is the wrong tool to pick up if you want to build a building. If you want to destroy one, sure, pick up a wrecking ball. But in the same way, why would we say we're going to take up science to build a better society when science is the wrong tool to do that? So we would want to look inherently to other more productive tools in doing that, things like philosophy, religion, Christian theology, tools that are meant to actually build and progress society forward and move it in a healthy direction. And so the question here then for us to consider is, what are we going to do as the church? If it is our job as the church, as Christian theologians, as Christian lay people, as pastors, and it's our job and our task to lead society forward in the way that we believe God is moving us to do, according to Scripture and according to the gospel, then my question is not for the scientists or the atheists. My question is for the church. What are we doing now, today? What are we doing a month, 6 months, 6 years, 60 years from now to move society forward? Are we simply going to surrender and lay down our responsibility to lead society? Or are we going to own it? And are we going to say it's our job to take society and move it in a godly direction? And I think what I see now when I look around is I don't see an overwhelming consensus of sort of taking society and leading it forward. I think the COVID pandemic has done much to reveal how ill-prepared the church has been to lead society. The church has done a very good job responding to the COVID pandemic. It has done a very good job of encouraging its people to love our neighbors, to help them, to encourage one another, to love one another. I think the church has done a good job of doing that. And so don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that the church hasn't responded well to the needs. I think the church has done a tremendous job responding to the needs of society in the midst of the pandemic. But I think one of the things it's also exposed is that the church is not prepared to actually lead society through this, to say, trust us, let's move forward in this direction together, and let's trust God and move forward, and let's do that. I don't see the church doing that. I don't see the church calling society to trust the scientists, to trust the science behind COVID and behind the vaccines. There's lots of conspiracy theories out there. There's a lot of people denying that COVID is even real. Oh, it's just the flu. The church is not taking leadership in this area, and I think this is a major test for the church. I don't think it's too late. I don't think we failed the test, but I do think it's important for the church to step up and say, look, guys, the science on this is conclusive. It's not just the flu. There's no conspiracy theory. The vaccine works, and it's not killing people, and doesn't have any mind-controlling devices or tracking devices. It's not funded, it's not a tool of Bill Gates to control people. It's just a regular vaccine that's safe. It works. We need to trust the science. We need to trust the scientists, and we need to move forward in getting this vaccine to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And then we need to be praying, we need to be serving, we need to be loving one another, we need to be building a better society so that when COVID finally is over and we're on the other side, we are in a new place, a better place than when we started pre-COVID. I would love it if the church actually took that position. The question is, will we? Well, that's our podcast for today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to leave it down below, and we'll do our best to interact and respond to those. You can also send us an email. Our email address is scienceandfaithdortmund@gmail.com. You can check out our website. Our website has a bunch of resources and articles up there for you to check out. Our website address is scienceandfaith.de. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time on the Science and Faith Podcast.